All right, thanks a lot for everybody for coming. This is to announce our results of the Operation Washout we had a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of January. It's a 10-day operation, and we had numerous agencies involved, so it was very successful. I'd like to introduce, so we're going to have four main speakers. The first off is going to be Sheriff Trosset, and then second we're going to have Galveston Police Chief Vernon Hale, and then Lamarck Police Chief Chief Jackson, and then our Marshal is going to speak to close it. After that, we can obviously take as many questions, and remember, we have a lot of agencies here in Galveston County that helped out. So if you guys want to direct specific questions to those agencies as well. All right, Sheriff.
Well, thank all y'all for coming out, and I want to first off thank the Marshal Service and everybody, every agency involved for coming together, one common goal, to work toward keeping the streets of Galveston County safe. It was an outstanding feat for the short time. You can see right here the numbers. The employees that come together, work together, I feel did a great job. And I want to thank them personally each too. So we want to make sure that the citizens of this county feel like they can come out of their house, feel safe, especially no matter what time of day or night it is. And I think this was a step in the right direction, and maybe more to come. But congratulations to everyone involved, and thank them for all their partnerships.
Chief Hale.
Chief Vernon Hale, H-A-L-E, Galveston Police Department. Thank you all for coming out. First of all, I just want to thank the U.S. Marshal's Office, all of our partners. There's too many to name, but you see it in the press release. But overall, I don't know about these guys, but I didn't make a single arrest. So I want to thank the men and women who are out there doing the work every single day, every single night. And they worked probably even harder leading up to this operation in order to gain the intelligence to ensure we targeted the right people. So thank you all for the work you did. It was an incredible feat. And just so we're clear, those 123 arrests, these weren't about traffic violations. These weren't about property crimes. These were not about petty crimes. These were about violent criminals operating throughout this county. And so the operation was intended to reduce that violent crime as we go into 2021. And then lastly, the most important thing is now that we have an Operation Wash Up. And what do we do now? Because we still have children in the street who need to be diverted from these gangs. We still have people who don't have to live with these quality of life conditions. And so now we have to do things to make sure we follow up and address the social needs of these communities so that we don't have to have these gang members operating like this, so that we don't have to have this violence. What is the root cause, and how do we start fixing it? Thank you all for your time and attention. Thank you for the men and women who did this work, and now let's continue to do our work.
Good morning. Chief Kurt Jackson, Lamarck Police Department. I want to start off by echoing Chief Hale's words. Thank you so much to the officers who are out there making the impact, and the impact has obviously been felt in the community. Even in the subculture, the communications within the criminal element, they're scared as well. This collaborative effort has been what this community needed, because criminals don't recognize boundaries. They don't stick to one city. They're all over the place, and this has been a countywide effort, and even extending outside of the county, because they're scared and they're running. But let me just say this: it's not over. We're still out there. We're still working on this. We're still looking for these folks. And it's going to stay that way. So to the folks that are out there still wanting to do bad, do evil, we're coming for you. Keep your head down, because we're coming for you. So thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it.
So I'm going to introduce our Marshal, and it's T. Michael O'Connor. T. Michael O. Connor, and he's the Marshal for the 7th District of Texas. Marshal.
Howdy. Have you heard that saying, justice is coming? Well, I can guarantee you justice is here. And we've had justice here all along. I'm unique as far as these type of operations. Well, I wouldn't say, but I can relate to local law enforcement. I was a sheriff for 16 years in Victoria County. I know the limitation of resources that afford us in these jurisdictions. The collaboration between state, federal, and local law enforcement is essential. And what we have seen here in this period of time is a great success and the collaboration amongst all. I had the opportunity to be out in the field on a couple of occasions, and I saw how they worked very diligently, seamless. And you know, when you have different agencies that haven't worked with each other for any period of time, you think that there's going to be glitches. None. I mean, it was just a constant pressure, constant dedication, and that's what the people in these communities need to understand, is the dedication. When we're asleep, those of you in law enforcement, local law enforcement, are up and after the bad guys. The only thing I can say to you, the bad guys, we are predictably unpredictable, so we will be coming after you. Justice is coming, justice is here, and justice is here to stay. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Marshal O'Connor, based on your last line there, do you see this as a reoccurring effort of bringing these collaborative forces together to make these concerted efforts throughout this region?
Well, U.S. Marshals have been funded over the years since 2010, and they have arrested thousands of violent crime, organized crime, and weapons. And so they see the importance of communities like this and others. There's Operation Triple Beam, and then there's Operation Washout. And we've been successful. I'll assure you that we will look forward in having further funding and continue this. You know, I hate to admit, but you suppress crime. I mean, I would like to eradicate crime, but crime continues. So we want to suppress them and let them move on or move out, one or the other. So yes, there will be other operations in and around the region.
Can you explain why this operation happened now, and is it directly related to violence that happened in December and months prior in Galveston County?
The program for funding is way in advance. So it doesn't, we do not react to any type of specific incident or event. But what we do is we talk in advance to the agencies. You know, like Corpus Christi, I'll give you an example. Being the sheriff there for 16 years, we had a lot of organized crime interaction. And when we saw the opportunity, and the chief mentioned to me that there's funds available, first thing is, let's go see if Corpus Christi is interested. The same thing here with the chiefs and the sheriffs. It's an ongoing situation. And again, I can relate to what goes on in local law enforcement in this continued increase. I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. You don't have to have one incident or one event to determine the necessity of having support.
Just to clarify then, Marshal, this was something was already in the works before a lot of what's been happening in the mid-Galveston County area had come up to the public surface.
That is correct.
That's correct. This was already in the works.
Yes, sir. And in the Southern District, which is quite vast, and from the Galveston, Houston Metroplex to Laredo to the Valley, we're constantly assessing and evaluating where we can be of a resource. We're here to support. We're not primary, but we have to collaborate, and it's the interest of the local jurisdictions to which they have to, basically, I guess you could say, invite us to come in. And such resources. Listen, I've only been a marshal barely, not even a year in February. But I realized the utilization of the marshal service as sheriff. But I didn't imagine the expanse of capability the marshal service has. And that is tremendous. We need to tell more, know more, and do more because of the expanse of resources. And again, the limitations of local law enforcement.
And we should point out, you deputized a lot of local law officers to be part of this task force, correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Any idea how many local law enforcement officers were deputized
I,
as part of this?
and I could probably be off base, but I think it was about 40 officers that we swore in the beginning of this, of every jurisdiction. Why it is a marshal? It gives broad authority in what we were pursuing in violent crime warrants and conduct.
Now, does this mean that those who are arrested face federal charges, or will it be charges based on the local level?
It varies. You know, predominantly it's going to be federal charges, but it depends on the case-by-case basis, whether we go state or federal. That's why we need our partners, because they're the ones that know the communities. They know the trouble spots and what needs to be worked on. And so we're going to follow their lead in putting the emphasis. And if they're the ones that says it's best to go state, then so be it. We go state.
Can you say how many of these 123 people are still in custody, or are they all in custody, or has some been released?
I'm sure I couldn't give you that information. We'll provide you that. But I would say that they had probably been arraigned and they may have been bonded out, but that would have to be with someone else, either through the sheriff's office. But we could probably get your name and we can get you that information if it's to be provided.
Maybe you or Chief Jackson or Chief Hale can talk about this. Chief Jackson particularly talked about the impact this has had on, I gather, the Lamar community. And you know there have been a lot of people saying that they're scared of gunshots and things being, happening over there. When you say you feel the difference, like, was this a relief to you to have these guys in there? Or like, what helped change things in your department?
Well, as I said, this was a collaborative effort countywide, and this was having additional resources to be able to go out and look for the bad guys that are out there. And this was all of the agencies coming together to do it. And even the early on, we were hearing about comments about these tactical teams that are out there doing these enforcement efforts. So the message got out pretty quick throughout the community, and both the citizens and in the criminal network, that they were out there doing this. So the impact was felt pretty early on.
Chief Jackson, and also Chief Stanton, you may be able to speak to this, because really between that West Texas City and Lamarck area, there's that back and forth of a lot with the gang activity and the shootings that have happened there. Chief Jackson, you said this continued. It's one thing to have the marshals here for that 10-day and that effort. How is it going to continue? Would you be pushing for, say, a resumption similar to the narcotics task force, to a countywide gang task force or something like that, to keep this more pressure and get funding for a local effort?
Well, obviously you don't tell your adversary your tactics. So I'm not going to go into depth, but I will tell you that the law enforcement agencies in the community are going to continue and are still continuing to work collaboratively to address the criminals that are out there.
Were any of these arrests specifically related to homicides that have happened in your community, or there was one in Galveston lately? I don't think we've seen a murder charge or any of these directly related to homicides that have happened lately.
Directly? No. Indirectly, yes.
What does that mean?
There were people who were suspected to be involved in these groups that have been engaging in this activity who were arrested.
And you're hoping that information that leads to more on those homicides?
Yes.
Chief Stanton, wanted to give you a chance to address the same issue.
Chief Joe Stanton, Texas City Police Department. Texas City and Lamarck are joined at the hip. Our communities are very well connected. I have an outstanding relationship with Chief Jackson, and we do work collaboratively all the time. It's a situation where what's happening in Lamarck affects Texas City, and what happens in Texas City affects Lamarck. And I'll just say this: the relationships in Galveston County among the executive level of law enforcement has never been better. And this success of this operation is a direct result of those relationships that we built. from the federal level, the state level to us, it's outstanding. And that's a big, we're in constant contact with each other, especially Chief Jackson and I. We talk weekly about what's going on, how things are happening, because again, it affects each other in our cities. So.
To ask that though, and Chief Hale, you may want to chime in on this too. These efforts have concentrated 10 days, obviously you don't want to give up tactics, but does there need to be kind of a focus with this similar type of approach just year round until you can get what seems to be, at least in the public perception, is something that's out of hand, get it under control?
Yes.
And I wanted to hear from the three of y'all, since y'all been kind of in the forefront of dealing with that. I agree either one of y'all, but Chief Hale, I thought.
Well, first of all, from the guys who did the work, did we make any homicide arrests in that 123? I didn't get all the charges, so.
There was at least one homicide arrest and a few connected homicides.
At least one homicide arrest and several connected to homicides. And before I get to your question, I'll tell you, first of all, there's been no society that's been able to arrest its way out of crime. And so this won't be just about task forces and going to put people in jail. For me, the 123 isn't about the numbers. It isn't about putting 123 people in jail, because we can do that on any given day. It's about putting the right people in jail. And so I don't deal in quantity, I deal in quality. And so we want to make sure we target those people who are impacting crime the most. Secondly, the catalyst for me was probably the drive-by shooting that happened in Wright County. Thankfully, thank God, no one got hurt. But our kids shouldn't have to be able to not be able to go play basketball. The shootings in a couple of complexes where folks were shooting at each other and a couple of innocent people got bullets, which you saw the press release on, and that's not fair. So that quality of life is the catalyst for me. So I think we continue to put the right people in jail, not focusing on the numbers, but focusing on the individuals, people, places, and behaviors. But I think we also have to look at the bigger picture and start collaborating with our community members to make sure we have some gang awareness. We got parents raising gang members that don't know their kids are gang members. How do we address that? So we got to have some awareness at the parent level. We got to have some awareness at the community level, and we've got to have some other efforts to give these kids outlets and things to do beyond just placing them in jail. And quite frankly, some of these kids are going to come out of jail, and we've got to have reentry programs and things to deal with them besides just keep arresting them. But it is very important that we hold them accountable for their violent actions.
Sheriff, at one point here recently, you said, need help. The type of help that you asked for?
Well, our partnership with the Marshal Service has been going on at the Sheriff's Office here for decades. I mean decades. And it went to the next level. Former sheriff, friend of mine from another county, became marshal. And the communication between us, again, just went to the next level. His predecessor and I were friends too, but you know, I could call Chief Michael and just aggravate him regardless. But our relationship worked with his relationship with all the other. When we met upstairs, up in the judge's chambers, when he swore these individuals in, you knew immediately what type of level this event was going to cause. Operation Washout was a success, and I think at any given time when we need to communicate and need help, need assistance, I think he's going to be there. And collectively, you asked several questions in effect. We met the chiefs in this county, and we've already been discussing what we can do for the next step. Collectively, each agency, to make sure we've got something in place to see if we can curve the things that are going on the street as far as criminal activity.
Thank you to the media for your cooperation throughout this operation. We know things you did is overtime.
I have one more. You know, we witnessed and we heard about the operations that were going on. There were, you know, tactical units, I guess I would call it, you know, in force with weapons. And I just wonder, were there any incidents where a person was pulled over or these units were used where a person that was pulled over basically at gunpoint not charged with the crime, or was everybody that was detained as part of this program arrested?
If we pull our weapons, you're going to jail. There's a reason why. That should answer your question. But I want to compliment the people of this community You know, being the marshal, growing up as a cowboy, I always wanted to be first at everything, whether it's a SWAT team or whatever. But I realize that I'm at the age to which I cannot do such. But these men and women that were part of these task force teams, you know, at least they let me join them. They decided to assign me to do traffic instead. And the reason why I'm saying this is, you know, you have the perimeter. That's, you know, you got the core team and then you got the perimeter. So I was able to visit with many of the children and individuals coming by, and they were extremely complimentary for us. Now, they didn't know one from the other. They just knew it was law enforcement and some kind of law enforcement action was going on. But what was heartfelt is the fact that they would take the time while I'm doing traffic to stop and thank us, thank me, honk the horns. I mean, they go by. So they very realize the importance of law enforcement and the necessity of pursuing the criminal element. So my hat's off to those of you in these communities that took the time. I mean, they could just pass through and go on to where they should have been. But nonetheless, they made efforts to compliment the men and women that were on the streets. Thank you.
Can I answer one of your question? As far as the tactical gear, you know, day in and day out, we wear a uniform so people recognize that you're law enforcement. But when you work a program like this, you need to come out with that tactical gear because you know the type of individuals that you're dealing with, and you know they're willing and will be having guns and willing to use them. So we're going to make sure they got the tools needed to do their job and be successful and still be able to go home at the end of the day. So yes, when we have programs like this, you're going to see the individuals out in that type of gear. And they can call it tactical gear, whatever they want to. It's safety that's needed for these officers when they're doing these certain events.
Were any shots fired at all during this thing? Was there any incidents between?
I'm worried.
No.
No police shooting.
Remember, we're after violent criminals. You have to be geared and prepared and of a mindset, just like the sheriff said.
All right, that will conclude our press conference. If anybody has any individual questions for the many agencies that are listed on your handout, feel free to hunt them down. They're going to be